Welcome to Buckets. My name's Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network. And much like Wolverine in the Disney universe, I'm pulling in Brandon Anderson once again. He's going to be doing this till he's 90 because we're going to do the MVP deep dive. I looked at our very good compilation of contributors, and I actually polled all of our contributors about like, hey, how much do you want to talk about DPOY? How much do you want to talk about most improved? How much do you want to talk about win totals? Spoiler alert, we're going to have a lot of win totals content. MVP was the one that when I asked folks about it, and then I was like, why was it so low on your list? Multiple of our contributors were like, I'm really worried about doing it because you and Brandon do such a good, deep job of it. And I was like, okay, well, you're a coward. But you're also right. And so in the middle of football season, I have pulled in Brandon Anderson, NBA futures analyst, and we are going to do the MVP deep dive. We're going to talk about today the process for determining MVP, about how you should look at betting it, when you should bet it, the narrative conversation, all of these types of things. And we will get to the most pressing question in my brain, which is, am I really not going to fucking bet Nikola Jokic again? Am I really going to do this for the fourth year in a row? We'll talk about all that and more, and everything we talk about, plus our bets, can be found in the award-winning Action Network app. Best way for you to track your picks. You also get to track everybody else's picks. If you sign up for Pro, you're going to get a lot of stuff that you need as a bettor. You're going to get Brandon's picks the second that they come out. So when he posts these things, like the 10 bets that he logged on his Friday NFL Best Bets episode, you're going to get them then, before the line moves. You're going to get Sean Kerner's. Sean puts in a bet, that line's going to move. You need to be, if you want to be able to tail Sean effectively, our head of analytics, which you want to do, go look at his ROI in the Action Network app. You need to be able to get his updates as soon as they come in. Also, the line alert, which you get with the Pro subscription. Massive. Like, there are NFL games that I definitely want at 4.5, and I do not want at 4. And being able to say, hey, when this hits this number, let me know. Panthers versus Saints last week bounced like 18 different times between numbers because
didn't matter, but it bounced.
It didn't matter, but it bounced. And so the various groups were like warring as it goes back and forth. To make sure that you get the price you want, you need to turn on those price alerts, which means you need to get the pro subscription. Also, check out youtube.com/The Action Network. We'll have this podcast. We will have all of our podcasts. We will have Green Dot Daily. There's Power Hour for NFL. There's the Touchdown Show with Gilles Gallant. There's so much good stuff. Check it out. You got Brandon on all those podcasts. Check them out at youtube.com/The Action Network. Also, check out the Big Bets on Campus podcast. Programming note, you can catch me on this Friday's edition of WNBA Buckets, as I'll be doing the WNBA playoff preview with Jim Turvey. Excited to dive into all of that. Should be a good show. Check out the WNBA Bucket Show for the playoff preview. All right, Brandon. So we have done this 3 or 4 years in a row now. And you are among the very best at going through the historical data and outlining, hey, because honestly, when we started this process and you brought all this information, I was like initially like, well, come on, it's got to be pretty, like, there's got to be a lot of outliers. And then like the more that we researched it, the answer is no, there are not outliers. There are guys who win MVP and there's guys who don't win MVP. So I would like you to take us through this question. What are the historical thresholds and the history of the award to answer this query? Who wins MVP?
Yeah, I am I Wolverine in this scenario, or am I Deadpool? Like, we're Wolverine.
No, you are absolutely Wolverine. Constantly cranky, always surly, very confident, and I am very much Deadpool. That is the combo here.
All right, so who wins MVP? I've got the 5 rules. We're going to kind of skim through the first 3 rules because they're the obvious ones. They're the ones everybody knows already, and you can read more about them. You listen to old podcasts we've done about this. But I want to get to the other 2 that are a little bit more tricky and I think more defining. So number 1, you got to score points. Okay, hooray. We know that 25 points or more, 15 of the last 16. That doesn't seem like much. We only had 18 guys last year score 25 and only 13 that qualified at 65 games. So it's not much, but it's a barrier. The whole point of all this is we are setting up barriers to not necessarily tell us who's going to win, but like you said, who doesn't. All right, number 2, you got to win a lot of games. Again, duh, we know. We want the top scorer on the best team. We know. This is what we do for MVP. Here's the numbers. 84% top 2 seeds this century. All but 2 top 3 seeds, 2/3 of them on the 1 seed. Last 15 years, 60 win pace. Even the last 8 years, even as we start to get some more outliers with lower win totals, still last 8 years, 56 win pace. So bare minimum here, historically, you need your guy to win 54 games and be at least the 3 seed. Otherwise, you are betting on a severe outlier here. Number 3, you got to play a lot of games. Again, duh, we know. Embiid was an exception here. He is the only player since 1978 to win MVP and miss more than 11 games. Now, I do think the bar is lowering here a little bit. We have the 65 minimum. I think it's probably like 72, 74-ish games. That 11-game mark, 10 games somewhere in there, I think that's about right. So, you got to score a lot. You got to win a lot. You got to play a lot. Any thoughts so far, Matt?
Nope, that all tracks. I think the scoring thing is really interesting. Like, yes, you can go back to like Steve Nash, right? There are, when I say this, like there are outliers, but that's the point is like they're outliers. They fall very far outside of what we historically think. So like, I just don't think you should be talking yourself into anybody who you don't think is going to average 25 plus. I definitely don't like, I think one of the things with the 65 game requirement is interesting because we will have a year where it's going to be like, this guy played 65 games on the dot and the other guys played 78 or 80. But the statistical markers bend a lot towards the guy that played 65. And so, like, that's going to be a pretty nasty thing. However, I do think 2 and 3 are correlated. If you do not play, if you play 65 versus 80, like, that's a 15-game difference. For a superstar level player, your win probability drops, so you may not hit that threshold. So, like, they are pretty correlated. You're going to need guys that you believe are going to be able to play the entire season. Not the entire season, but at least are going to be able to get to, I think, 75.
Yeah, and really, I think a lot of these are correlated. So I think, honestly, the next one I think is correlated with that too. Number 4, you got to be young, but not too young. So this century, 84% of all MVPs are in the age range 24 to 28, including 13 in a row right now and counting. Derrick Rose, the only MVP since the year I was born, 1983, under the age of 24. And to be clear, I'm going age years based on the Basketball Reference, which I believe cuts off February 1st, just so it's clear on the age number. But some notable names that this rule would rule out. We will come back to this. On the low end, Anthony Edwards, 23. He's a year away from being eligible, Matt, according to this rule. And of course, Victor Wembanyama is only 21 this year. We'll talk about those guys. More interestingly, perhaps, on the high end, we talked about this long last year. Joel Embiid and Giannis and Jokic, the guys that have dominated the MVP circuit for half a decade now, they're all aged out, according to this stat that we have. Embiid 30, Giannis 30, Jokic is 29, turns 30 in February. Last year, Jokic technically made the cut by 2 weeks because of the way that the deadline goes. This year, he definitely doesn't make the cut, and he turns 30 halfway through the season.
He's out.
He's out. It's done.
He's out. No chance.
Tell the voters he can't do it anymore. But no, I think it correlates. Like, when you get older, you don't play as much anymore. And maybe you don't go as hard as much some of the nights that you do play. And so now maybe your scoring ticks down a little bit because of that. Maybe you played a few less minutes on the games you did play. Like, again, it all is correlated here. So that's the age one. We're going to have a section we come back to on that. So I'm going to go right into number 5 because I think this is the one that really narrows things the best. Number 5, last rule. You're going to be an established superstar. We do not pick surprise MVPs very often. So here's some of the data for that. 14 of the last 16 MVPs finished top 6 in MVP voting the year before. Top 6. That's 6 dudes we're down to 88% of the time. In fact, 12 of the last 16, 75% of them, top 4. So you just look at the top 4 guys, or over half, 9 out of 16, just finished first or second in last year's MVP voting. So over half the time, you could literally look at 2 names and be right about MVP. So that's one spot, MVP voting. You know I love my BPM, box plus minus, 7.4 or better last year. Everyone in the last 15 years except for Giannis and Derrick Rose. So There's 5 guys that did that last year. Jokic, Embiid, Luka, Giannis, Shai. End of list. That's it. 5 dudes. I know you love EPM. 10 straight MVPs have finished top 9 in EPM the year before. Same 5 guys, Brunson, LeBron, PG, Kawhi. That's it. That's the whole list. That's the only guys eligible to win this award based on what history has told us so far. And every single MVP, other than Derrick Rose, has had at least one previous MVP vote since 1969. Trae Young, Kyrie Irving, no votes. No real surprise. Halliburton, no votes. Zion, no votes. And importantly, Victor Wembanyama, no votes. So, you've got to be established. You got to have a voting history. You got to have the advanced metrics history. It's a lot of data, a lot of numbers. What do you think about that?
Well, one, just thanks for throwing in EPM, buddy. I appreciate you doing that. 2, so I think this was the marker that I did not. The last thing you mentioned was honestly the big thing that I talked myself around too much last year with Shai. Is that I genuinely believe that the biggest reason that Shai didn't win MVP. This is not about whether he deserved to or not. I know how you feel about Jokic winning. It's that I feel like the voters were just like, okay, sure, I guess like Shai's like good, but like I don't know him. And there just wasn't a confidence there. And I kept being like, how do you not know Shai Gilgeous-Alexander? Like, that's a problem on my part, is that like a lot of times, like, there are voters who are very top level in the NBA. And I'm just like, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's been good for years. Like, he's been good for years. And he's been hurt, but he's been good for years. And like, it doesn't, we knew Shai was going to be great coming into this season. And I just underrated the fact, and I think that I will say, I want to kind of tab onto this. I haven't done the data work, and I don't really know how to approach it. I honestly think, Brandon, that there's something to be done about, have you made a playoff appearance yet? Like a run. Because I think that is a reason why Luka has transcended some of the younger guy stuff with where he's placed in the award, and why he starts every year as a favorite. Is because he's been popping in, he's been in the playoffs since 2020. So like we have seen him come spring. Last year was the first time that a lot of people like saw Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And it baffles my mind that an MVP voter would be like, but we saw this honestly in 2023 with the Nuggets after Jokic had already won 2 MVPs, where there were national media members who was like, you know who's really good? This Jokic guy. Like, this Jokic guy's pretty good. And the rest of us are just like, are you kidding me? But I think that's kind of like, that's a little bit of what happened last year with Shai, where in that second round series, when like Shai was still killing the Mavericks, like they won, but Shai was killing them. And everybody's like, God, Shai's a badass. And the rest of us are like, where have you been? Like, this is who he is. And so I think that there has to, like, I would be interested for us to, in the future, look at the impact of guys that have or have not made substantial playoff runs. And I think it's got to be with a certain usage rate, because it can't be like Shai had a playoff appearance before, but he was like just a guy.
Yeah, James Harden and Thunder comes to mind there.
Right. So like you have to be able to make that jump there, I think, in consideration in order for and like you have to have been seen in a playoff environment. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think the playoff thing is interesting. I definitely don't have the data for it, and I'd be interested to dig into it. I think the way I think of this is similar, but not playoff related, which is I sort of feel like we talk about like, are you in the MVP conversation? Like, well, you know, you flip on ESPN, we'll have that conversation this year. Is Jalen Brunson in the MVP conversation? Okay, which conversation do you mean? Do you mean the one where we get to vote 5 names on the ballot? Is he in that conversation? Or do you mean, can he actually win? Because those are very different conversations. Yep. And we talk about it like the top 5 won, but bettors should not. We don't get any points or CLV or magic beans for finishing top 5. We got to win. And I think the way I think about this is I think there's dudes, and we'll get there. I think Wemby is here. I think Ant is here. I think Luka has been here and Shai has been here, but is past it now. I think you have to win your way onto the ballot. You have to win into the conversation, and then the next year or after that, you can actually win the award. And that's kind of the way where it's been with Defensive Player of the Year, NBA and NFL, as I've studied it. Like, certain awards, you've got to have the reputation, and you have to have proven you have the reputation by, quote, winning your way into the voting mix first. Now you've proven it. Like, same thing you're saying. You're saying I proved it in the playoffs. I'm saying I proved it in MVP voting. I'm not sure which it is. It's maybe a little bit of both. But I think you have to prove to enough people that you made it, quote, into the conversation, that next year you're in the conversation. Now you can actually win it. And I think that we don't distinguish that enough here, where guys are going to leap into things and be in the conversation, but still not quite necessarily get there. And I'm guilty of that. We all love our long shots. I want the long shot. We all want to come on here and give out the 100-1. And some awards allow you for that. And this just historically has not been an award that allows that sort of winner to come about.
Well, you've got some numbers on that. Tell me about what the history of the award says about the odds for these guys.
Yeah, so from sports odds history, this surprised me a little bit. I wondered what the odds looked at. So they got odds for the last 18 MVPs. So I think that's since 2007. 13 of our last 18 MVPs started the season per sports odds history plus 800 or shorter. That's not a lot of dudes. Plus 800 or shorter right now is 5 guys, and it's the same 5 guys we keep saying. It's Luka and Shai, and it's Giannis, Embiid, Jokic. That's the 5 that are in that range. However, 4 of the last 7 MVPs did not go. Sorry, 4 of the last 7 did. 3 of the last 7 were breaking that rule. Jokic, 2021 and 2022, had longer odds, and James Harden, the year he won, had longer odds. So it is closer to 50-50 lately. But then one other track here, and I think this is mostly just a LeBron stat, if I'm being honest, but from 2009 to 2017, we had 6 MVPs start at plus 300 or shorter. Again, 4 LeBrons. Since then, since 2017, only 1 plus 300 or shorter. So we normally are not getting a clear heavy favorite. Now that's actually not useful this year because there are no plus 300s and shorters, but there are 5 guys between plus 300 and plus 800, and that has been the sweet spot in the last long while now for betting MVP. So spoiler to my conclusion, we're going to keep getting there through a bunch of other names, but I think it's just 5 dudes. We want MVP to be a thing we're going to talk about and debate about and have 25 names about.
Could this guy win MVP?
Yeah, we're going to do it. You and I are going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it all year. We're going to argue on Slack. We're going to angrily text each other. We're going to hashtag MVP conversations on Twitter. We're going to do the whole thing. There's 5 guys. There's 5 guys that can do it, and we're going to tell you why.
Yeah, and I think that what I think is interesting from the 5 guys' perspective, 5 guys, haha, I'll get that sponsored, is the age thing, right? So, all right, Embiid's one of the 5, he's 30. Giannis is one of the guys, he's 30. Jokic one of the guys, he'll be 30. So, and he's outside of the 28 age range, right? He's 29, turning 30. And so, again, spoiler alert, we've got Luka and we've got Shai at the top of this list, and then there's Giannis, Jokic, and Embiid. Jokic's actually second favorite, but you got and 3 of those guys don't qualify for based off of these historical markers. So we're down to 2 guys, which is a pretty good position to have. And we'll talk about those later about whether we think him. So I want to start there. But I want to start with a 3-time MVP. So in 2021, I didn't think about it at all about Joker winning, and I got him in mid-season and made good money on him. In 2022, same deal, where it was, we didn't 2022, I came on and was like, do not bet Nikola Jokic. There is no way that they are giving him another award. They are not giving him another MVP. And then they did it. Right. And again, we got good prices in season, and I made money on it. 2023 happens, and Jokic probably deserves to win, but preseason again, I was like, well, there's no way that they're giving him 3 in a row. And they didn't, but God, was it close, and it took a lot by various people to make sure that it didn't happen.
And it really took the thing you just said, that we're not giving it to him 3 times in a row. Like, that is what it took for him not to win. Probably in hindsight, this is the year Embiid won, just for reference, if you're listening.
Yeah. And then last year, you know, I don't. I'll have to go back and listen to what we said, but I know, like, I didn't bet him again, and that's ridiculous for somebody who is as high on Yoke as I am, who watches him every night. Like, I have no excuse but to own up to that, because if I know how good he is, which I do, and I see him every night, and I see these odds, I should have been less skeptical of his chances of winning the thing. It was never for me about how good Yoke was. It was always about, like, yeah, okay, but the media does not like him for various reasons. Like, he is not a popular guy. He doesn't. He hates doing media, which is totally fine. I don't care that he hates doing it, but, like, he's never doing the sit down in March that Joel Embiid has done twice to try and get the award. That doesn't happen. Yoke's not doing it. He's not sitting down for that conversation. So now we're back here, and at least he's not 11 or 12 to 1 like we could have gotten him in some of these years. But it's a fourth. And one of the things I talked about last year was, yes, I do think that Shai's lack of awareness was part of it. But the counter argument to that is also, maybe we should throw out these rules when we have what is, you and I consider to be, an all-time great player. Like, this is an all-time legendary great player. And if you want to say, like, well, LeBron's an all-time great player, and he didn't win all these MVPs in a row. Well, he won 4. And he only won 2 back-to-back.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, are we not betting Yoke again? Again?
Yeah. So, okay, let me respond to a couple of those points. I think that's exactly the conversation. So I believe here's where I landed. I think that the repeat Jokic, the year that he won the second time, he was my pick. So I got that one. I thought it was outlandish that he was priced not as the clear favorite. Got it. The next year, I had Embiid as clearly as, like, okay, he's definitely in the mix. You should add him later. And then I footballed, and then the later happened, and I missed it because I was footballing. And so it's in my article, it's on the podcast. I didn't bet it. Hopefully you listened and did. I don't get credit for it because I didn't actually count it there. And then I did the same stupid thing with Jokic last year, where I was like, all right, well, you know, he's going to be tired. It's always a slow starter in the season. You absolutely want him in your position if you're building MVP position, but don't bet it now. The odds will get shorter. They're not going to start out hot. They're playing the long game. Nope, none of that happened. He just was really good right away. You still could have done it, though. Embiid was the big favorite. You could have added Jokic later. I could have added Jokic later. I footballed and didn't add Jokic later. So, I don't know. Like, if I really think that it's just the 5 guys and maybe I don't have time to play all year long, you could play the 5 guys together at 80% implied. You could just put them all in and get a minus 400 and you're like, done. That's it. I'm just going to play those guys. I got my MVP position. So there is that. Like, my track record so far on these podcasts we've done is the guys who are legitimately in the mix, we've nailed. We have exactly nailed who the conversation guys are. We just haven't nailed which one of the conversation guys. Maybe we should just be focusing on the conversation guys and make sure we get them all. So I think that's a valid thing to consider. I do think, looking at my rules, there's reason for concern here. So just going through them. Points per game, 26, 27, 26, 24 and a half. The one year he didn't win MVP. I don't know. Did that matter? Would an extra couple of points have mattered? I don't know. Like, stats matter to voters. Still, maybe that matters. He's not a 30 points a game scorer. He's not going to be. Games played. He did fine. He played 79. He looked tired. He looked real tired in the playoffs. Yep. He looked real tired in the Olympic run, which he had another bunch of games after that. He ain't going to play 79 this year. I'd happily take an under 78 and a half games played if that bet was available. I don't know that he's at risk to go under 65, but I don't think that's in his favor necessarily, especially as he turns 30. Another possible, we'll call these orange flags for my rules. Like, he's on the cusp on a lot of these. And then to your thing you asked, okay, do the rules just not matter? If he is an all-time great player, do the rules not matter? And here's where I think we have to guess a little bit. And my point, I'm a no bet on Jokic right now at plus 400. I may maybe add to position later. We'll see. I'm gonna watch basketball this year during football and see how that goes, and we'll do this again sometime. Here's where I'm at. We already decided Jokic is an all-time great by giving him a third MVP. But there's a difference between all-time great and LeBron great. There's a gap there still. And I personally am ready to put him in that group. You personally might be too, but I don't know that the media and voters are there yet. And the bar is so high for Jokic that I think even being just slightly the best player, which is what I think he was last year, is maybe not even good enough anymore. There are only 5 guys in NBA history who have won 4 MVPs. Jokic winning another one would tie him with Wilt Chamberlain and, more importantly, LeBron James. I assure you, if it comes time to actually turn your ballot in, there are going to be voters who are like, nope, I'm not having somebody tied with LeBron in MVPs. He's not LeBron. I'm not doing it. I promise you that's a thing. Only LeBron, Wilt, and Russell even won 4 MVPs in 6 years. This would be 4 and 5 years. Michael Jordan didn't even do it. Even if you take out the retired in between years, he still didn't do it in 4 or 5 seasons. That's how high the bar is here. So this is a Jokic 4 MVPs, 4 and 5 years is we are counting you among the greatest 5 to 7 players or less in NBA history by giving you this award. I don't think we collectively as a media voter base are there yet, especially with just the one championship ring. I think he's got to earn his way into that conversation, and I don't think he can win it because of it.
So the problem is that Jokic wouldn't have won it last year. Jokic wouldn't have. He wouldn't have won it last year. A lot of his advanced metrics actually dipped last year. I don't think it was nearly like the 2021, 22, and 23 seasons are such a class above what he did last year.
Yeah.
Now it's like, that's not how he gets judged, right? You don't like, this is a problem I always have is how do you judge it when I'm like, he's not as good as his other seasons, but it's still better than everybody else's. And this is kind of the thing is we might just run into a thing where it's just like, okay, but who else is it going to be?
Right.
If the Mavericks if I'm wrong on the Mavericks and you're right on the Mavericks and the Mavericks win 44 games, if the Thunder have injury issues, Joel's Joel, right? And the Bucks continue to struggle defensively and they wind up with 49 wins. And Yoke's still plugging along with the numbers that he puts up. Like he could just win by default, right? Yeah. And on the other side of that, though, is the Nuggets are definably worse than they were last year by losing KCP, and they were worse last year than they were the year before by losing Bruce Brown. And like Nuggets fans would say, we won 57 games last year, tied for the most in franchise history. Fine, I'm telling you, I cover that team every day. They were not as good last year as they were in 2023. They just were not, and that's not because they won the title that year and didn't. It covering the team day to day felt different. So they're gonna be worse this year. They're gonna be worse. And you mentioned the tired thing. They have to program in days off for him, and he's gonna fight it because he did this last year, where he's like, there's this Serbian thing of just like, no days off. I'm not doing like I'm gonna try and play every single game, and it's honestly quite ridiculous, but that's what he's going to do. He has played, by the way, he is tied with Jason Tatum for the most games played since 2019. He is second behind Tatum since the bubble.
That's counting playoffs, I assume.
Yeah, regular season and playoffs. Like, he's just played a ton of games. And last year in the playoffs was the first time when it was really like, he gassed out. He gassed out in the third quarter of Game 7, and it cost them the title. I'm not saying it was all on Jokic. The entire team played bad. Like, Jokic's final numbers were good, but I was in the building. I know what he looks like when he's tired. He was gassed after they tried to put him away in the third quarter, and that's why they came back in the fourth. And Malone has talked about, like, we can't have that happen again. They're going to try and program days off for him. I looked at this because I do Locked On Nuggets. They have an extremely easy front part of the schedule. They are tied for the least games before Thanksgiving. They are tied for the most between Thanksgiving and the All-Star break. They have a condensed middle part of the schedule, which is where it starts to get really tough, and then they're like middle of the pack in the back end. If they're not competing for the 1 seed, and like that was part of the problem last year, they tried to push through these hard schedule spots because they thought if we push through the hard spots, the other teams will fall off. And the other teams, the Wolves and the Thunder, just didn't. And so they had to scrap all the way to the last game of the season to get where they were as the 2 seed. And so if they're a little worse this year, that incentive won't be there. And that changes things too.
Yeah.
So I guess the answer is no. We're not betting Jokic again. And then again, I'm going to feel like a moron when he's leading the MVP straw poll come January. Talk to me about the age stuff and how much you buy into it.
Yeah, so we talked with Jokic just a bit ago. Like the age thing, it doesn't feel like we've seen the aging catch up with him at all so far. With Embiid, it definitely looks like it's catching up. He looks slow in the playoffs. He looks slow still in the Olympics. He's only cleared 65 games twice in his career, and that was 66 and 68. So that actually being a mark is always going to be a thing. And I know we're going to do the thing where like, well, but he was going to win last year. He was ahead. He was definitely going to win. He was the best player. I agree. He was the best player and deserving. But the entire cap with Embiid to start with was that he's not going to get to 65 games and can't do that version of him all the way through. Yeah. And that's part of what we're deciding here before the season by betting. Giannis, I think, is closer to that than we like to admit, closer to the Embiid version. He's missed a 65-game cut 3 out of 5 seasons, and he had 67 in another one. So he's missing games. Like, he's right in that range to the point that he would almost have to be, like, trying to win MVP and squeeze the last couple games out of there to get there. And I'm not sure that that's really his or the Bucks' priority right now. Similar to Jokic, and I don't know how I didn't talk about the Nuggets team thing. That's my lead point on it. So I echo all the things you said. MVP is a team bet. If you're betting Giannis, you're betting on Dame, you're betting on Doc, you're betting on the defense, you're betting a lot of stuff for a team that we saw fall back a lot last year. So here's where I'm at on the age thing for those 3 guys. I've said a whole bunch of times now, 5 guys. They're in my 5. They're 3rd, 4th, and 5th on my list. Here's the problem. It used to be, for several years we've done this, those were my 3 guys at like 30%, 25, and 20% to win MVP. A giant portion. Like, just bet those 3, ignore everyone else, we're done. Thanks, great podcast, everyone. They're still in my 5, but now it's like 12% Jokic, 6% for the other 2. They've fallen off a lot, but the odds haven't. And that's the problem. The odds are still 4-1 and around 7-1 for Embiid and Giannis. The odds have dropped a little, but they haven't dropped enough to match where things are at on the aging curve. And it's an aging curve, and we're going to get to the narrative thing. I think it's a narrative curve too. We've kind of like, we've done it. We've done the Giannis MVP. We've done Embiid. We've done Jokic. We've told all their stories. We like new stories. We like new stuff to talk about. I think that's kind of part of the aging curve too. So again, it's not that I don't think these guys can win it. With the percentages I just told you, I'm telling you about a 4th of the time, one of Jokic, Embiid, or Giannis wins it. The problem is that basically is one of them winning it, quote, by default, because the 2 guys I think are much more likely to win it, Shai and Luka, didn't win it. They got hurt, their teams are bad, whatever. Those things can happen. But I think these are guys, they're so good, and at least one of them is going to play enough games that like they're going to be in it. They're going to be in the conversation. They're going to be on the ballot. We're going to vote for them. If you and I got to vote at the end, I promise you these 3 names would be names that we would consider in our like 8 possibilities to vote for 5 guys. They're going to be there. I just think at this stage, they're going to be there more toward the bottom of the mix. Jokic less so. He's still going to be at the top of the mix. But adding in the age thing to the pricing is the main problem, where the pricing has not dropped off enough to reflect where their actual odds have dropped.
I mean, some of this is also because all of the awards are always a parlay of like all of these different factors coming together. Right. But more specifically with the framework that we have, if you're betting on these guys, what you're betting is you're betting the over on games played 65.5. You're betting on their win totals across the board, I think have to be over. I don't see, maybe Yoke can win with 51, like a 51 win season.
I doubt it.
But it would have to be like, again, with the parlay, a 51 win season for Yoke, but then you're also betting on unders for Shai and the Thunder, for the Thunder under and Luka under and Sixers under and Giannis under,
And like
right?
frankly, and Jamal Murray under, and like a lot of stuff has to go bad for the Nuggets to have only won 51 if Jokic played that well.
Right. And so there's like all of these, like with the structure that we have. Now, if you disagree with that structure and you're just like, I think the Nuggets are the best team, I think they're going to win 65 games and that Yoke will still put up numbers, then by all means, 400 is a great price for you right now. Like, you should bet that. Like, you can express that opinion in the marketplace. But I do agree with you that when we kind of look at these numbers and how short they are, even we take Yoke out of it, we take Giannis. Like, it's okay. We have to take over on Giannis games played. You honestly need to take over something like 49.5 on Dame games played. Then you have to be able to take, it would be like a parlay on the defense will move into the top 10. And then you also like, and you have to have Giannis put up the numbers when a lot of his like his assists basically dropped off because Dame took over the responsibility last year. So like all of these parlays is why I don't think those numbers are accurate, versus there is a very straightforward formula for the top two guys on our list, which are Luka and Shai, and that's boring because they're the favorite. But guess what? They're the favorites because of like the logical construct here. It's the over for Dallas, and Luka plays 65 with what he does statistically nightly. For Shai, it's the over on the Thunder, which I'm very high on, and then it's Shai putting up the numbers that he did last year. And if those two things happen, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has a very good chance of winning MVP. Talk to me about the old guys, about the possibility of an outlier here for the old guard of Steph, KD, LeBron, Kawhi, I guess Dame, Jimmy Butler. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's just not a lot to talk about here. I think it's too much to ask. Like all the parlay stuff you just said, it's parlaying all that even more on guys who are even less likely to hit the 65, 70 games, on teams that are even less likely to hit a 1 seed range. Of that list, LeBron's 200 to 1. You said it with Jokic, like you get your own rules. If LeBron is in the mix, and we're kind of agreeing that there aren't a lot of candidates here. So if we're agreeing like if Shai and Luka didn't get there, and it's kind of just these other three, but also maybe kind of LeBron, I'm not going to stop you from putting a 200 to 1 LeBron, and just like he's going to get his own rules if he's anywhere close. And they're like, you know what? Why don't we, like the narratives obviously is just going to write itself. And like, quite frankly, if like I had him 5th on my ballot last year, he still is that good, even though he also had his worst season since his rookie year. That's fine. Those things can both be true. So I don't hate you for betting LeBron 200 to 1. I don't think the rest of these guys have any realistic chance. I think they are have a moment, be on TV, be in the conversation for a month when everything went great, but you're inevitably going to have like the Embiid crash where it's like, yeah, well, Steph rolled his ankle, he's out for 3 weeks because he was doing so much so long for the team, and that's where it's at. Do you think any of these guys have any real chance at all?
0 chance on Jimmy Butler, 0 chance on Dame, 0 chance on Kawhi. Durant's an interesting one from the perspective of you're very high on the Suns win total over. And if they were to secure a 1 seed and KD absolutely pours it in, like if KD were to lead the league in scoring, which is hard to do because you have to foul grift so much to get there. But if he were to have just like an outrageous scoring season, now I don't know what that looks like with Devin Booker on the team. Like, how does he get to that usage level? And then Steph is a hard no for me, just because I'm like, you can't ask Steph to be 2016 Steph. You can't ask him to be 2015 Steph. Like, you can't even ask him to be 2019 Steph. Like, you have to be able to manage this. When you're in your mid 30s, you just can't do it. And so there's got to be a little bit more balance. I think they want a little bit more balance. So I'm with you. LeBron is the only play. LeBron, though, is like, it's ridiculous. I just looked this up because I was like, well, wait, what's like 55 plus wins? 55 plus wins for the Lakers is plus 940 versus 200 to 1 for LeBron. Just bet the LeBron 200 to 1. I mean, if they win 55 plus games, LeBron James is winning MVP.
Like I legitimately, I put the odds that I make my own odds of what I think the top like 10, 15 guys are for MVP. You've heard me say a lot of times, my 5 guys, guess who's number 6? It's LeBron freaking James at age 40. He's number 6 out of all the guys ahead of Jason Tatum, ahead of Steph and Tatum. Like, it doesn't matter. I have LeBron at like 2.5 to 3%. That means 200 to 1 is not the right price. I think I just talked myself into it. I got to put like a quarter unit on LeBron just because it's the wrong price and it's not going to happen, but it's not 200 to 1 not going to happen. How about the young guys, particularly? How about Wemby? What do you do with Wemby this year?
So you're in a different spot than I am because you believe in their over so much and you think that they're going to be good. Now you don't think that they're going to be 50 wins good, so that's probably like a little bit of the restriction point. His impact is so high, but his game is still so raw. Like, he just has a lot of possessions on both ends of the floor where he's still a baby giraffe trying to find his legs. He doesn't have a great jumper yet. He doesn't have great post-up moves. A lot of his offensive moves are out of control. Now, he's better than anybody at his size should rightfully be and is a complete alien. But I do not see a scenario where he jumps to 28 points per game. And so, like, the case would be like, look, he's averaging 28 points, 12 boards, and 4 stocks. And I don't know the list of guys that have done that. I'm going to bet it's small, if anybody ever. And so if that's like the case, that's outrageous. But then the Spurs would also have to get there. So for me, it's like, I don't think his game is ready there. I legitimately don't. Like, I think Luka had a better chance at Wemby's age of winning MVP than Wemby does. And I don't think the Spurs are ready to win that many games. So that combination means like he's a hard no for me.
Yeah, he, unfortunately, even for me, high on Wemby and the Spurs is also a hard no as a bettor. I'm not going to rule him out winning it this year because I think he is that freakishly good. But again, look at my stats. 21 points a game last year. It's not enough. Games played. Going to probably still be a thing. I hope it's not. We've seen him healthy for a year, but we were concerned going into last year with the body type. 54 wins you need. The number is like 35 right now. That's like 20 wins over the win total. That's too much, even for me, the like irrationally high on the Spurs and defense thing. To me, this is a CLV play. This is a cash out play. If you think you can do that, then you can do it. But also, the number is not even that long to give you odds there anyway. Like, what I want to bet is, how about this, Matt? If I gave you, I know you would kill to be able to do this, betting on over under MVP finish at the end of the year voting, over under 4.5 Wembanyama MVP finish this year.
Over
under 6.5.
Over.
See, I would go under the 6.5 in a heartbeat. I would smash under 6.5, and I would strongly consider under 4.5. I clearly said a bad line there. That to me, this is, we said this earlier, this is the prove that I've got your attention and be into the mix year. And then next year, even though he breaks a lot of the rules, I think Wembanyama is going to break the rules. So I don't care that he breaks a lot of the rules. I just think he needs one more year to win people over before he makes the playoffs and all that to like prove he's in the mix. So I can't get there yet.
Yeah. So what I think is funny is in the odds board of one book, he's 18 to 1. And the next guy is Jason Tatum at 25 to 1. And like that to me is a categorical, like that's an example to me of these odds are too, like the Wemby hype has infected all of the odds boards, which is not to say that I don't buy the Wemby hype, but it's like, look, Jason Tatum has a better chance of winning MVP than Victor Wembanyama. And you could be like, he's not that good of a player and he's not, no, but Brandon, he is the best player on a team that you and I both expect to win 55 plus games this season.
Yes.
Okay. And he finished in the conversation 6th last year with 86 total points. Like, this is not about how you feel about Jason Tatum. Okay. This is about the voters are not going to be like, they're not going to insult Jason Tatum. You would be willing to insult Jason Tatum. But the voters are not going to insult Jason Tatum by putting Victor Wembanyama in the second season for what is likely like a 45-47 win team over him if the Celtics live up to expectation. They win 55 games. It's not going to happen.
I disagree, but we're going to get to the winning thing shortly. I think if you could bet Tatum versus Wembanyama head-to-head MVP ballot finish, I think you've made a very strong Tatum case.
We got to put all right, we're doing
win the award. I don't think Tatum. I'm done. I'm done with Tatum. He was one of my best bets last year. If you're not going to win it that year with that juggernaut team as the best player, you're never winning.
That's why he didn't win. That's why he didn't win, though. All right, well, let's do this because I can never drag you into bets. Let's do a dinner. We'll do a dinner bet next time that we are in the same spot. We'll probably be in New York for an action thing. We're betting a dinner that the CLV, that the closing line for MVP, Jason Tatum will be shorter than Victor Wembanyama, and you can take Wemby.
When are we calling closing line? Just like April 1 or
last
something?
Last day of the regular season.
All right, let's go.
Done. Okay. Let us know in the comments at youtube.com/The Action Network which one you think is going to be the winner of this bet.
Well,
all right.
One other young guy here, just to mention other young names. Ant is the other, like too young for the list. He's 23. My age says 24 to 28. Ant's not there yet for the similar reason. He was 22nd in EPM last year and 38th in BPM. I think Ant just had his year to make a case of being the best player on a really good near one seed team. I think that was the Derrick Rose MVP year, but he wasn't quite Derrick Rose yet. I think Ant is going to get there probably eventually. I think he's in the same mix of you got to earn your way into the top 5 once, and then we'll come back and actually include you. He's Luka a couple years ago. He's not there yet. I know you want to talk long shots. Do you think this is the year for MVP long shots? Spoiler, we keep calling it 5 guys, so I think we've know our answer, but what do you think?
Yeah, so I mean, I've made some historically just hilariously terrible bets on long shots because I get suckered in by the idea of what could be. And look, I will say this because those bets are basically CLV sandwiches, and that's one of the things that I've kind of learned is like, is a bet good if it has CLV? Yeah. Should you bet it? No. Like, it's great to pick, but like that doesn't mean you should bet it. And so this is kind of the idea here is just like, if we say that the top 5 guys, 3 of those guys do not qualify because of the age thing, and we think that they'll slide out. Like if you take Embiid and you're just like, look, odds are he's not going to play 65. He's not going to qualify. Okay. So then you can slide up one of the other guys like Jalen Brunson or Victor Wembanyama or Jason Tatum, and you can slide those guys up. But there's also the possibility that somebody jumps from outside in, not to win the award, because we talked about how you can't win it if you're not in that top selection, if you haven't already been voted on, but to make the ballot, to be quote unquote in the conversation, to make ballot. And like, that's the difference here is like, I've bet people to be on the ballot. And if you look at it from that lens, they were okay bets. But that bet's inherently stupid because being on the ballot doesn't mean you win. And understanding that difference is something that I've had to get better at. That's why I like doing the podcast, is we learn stuff like that. There's still guys I want, right? A big one here is for me is Tyrese Halliburton, who we bet last year at 50 to 1, and he's now 75 to 1. I don't know why. Like I mentioned, I was like, I really want to put Halliburton first team, but I'm not gonna. It needs to be Jalen Brunson or Jason Tatum. And I got like monster pushback on that before the Eastern Conference Finals. People were like, are you insane? Like Halliburton is way worse than Shai in terms of people do not understand. Again, the best offensive engines in the NBA currently, not in terms of skill, not in terms of ability, not in terms of clutchness, not in terms of impact on winning. I'm talking about you put the ball in their hands and you're going to have a great offense. Who are the 2 best guys at that? The first guy is Nikola Jokic. The second guy should be Luka Doncic, but I'm telling you it's not. As much as we'll talk about Luka, it's Tyrese Halliburton. That Pacers offense is insane. And if you want proof of that, listen to Joe Mazzulla on the Locked On Celtics podcast, where he said the Pacers were the toughest matchup for them. You want to know why? Because you can't contain them. They swept them. And he was like, that should have been a 7-game series. Because of how much pressure that offense puts on Boston. Because Boston was uncomfortable against a team that is that heavily weighted in that direction. Okay? I just think that Tyrese Halliburton is that good. And people are just reluctant to the idea. But however, the reason I won't bet it is I feel like we're so far behind. Even making the fucking conference finals isn't enough where people are still kind of like, yeah, but come on. And I'm like, all right, fine. So no Halliburton for me. Ja Morant's the other one at 30-1 that I think you probably have some interest in. Give me your thoughts on Hallie, and then we'll talk Ja.
Yeah, Hallie was 150-1 a month ago when I prepped for this. So his odds have already dropped a little bit, which doesn't take much when you're that long. I think it's the same thing we're talking about. He's not scoring enough points for voters. Like he's barely cracking 20. He's not going to hit 25. And it's a team thing. Like the team's not going to be good enough. And the team's not going to be good enough, frankly, in part because of Halliburton on the other end of the court and the bad defense that they're going to bring to the table. That is part of his thing. And it's a thing that we've seen also proven through the conference finals. And it's a thing that I think we've seen voters will hold against him until we see something otherwise. Like his offense is so good. I think the advanced metrics could be there. I think they were there last year until he got hurt and they fell off. I agree with your assessment. I think he absolutely should be top 10. I think he absolutely could push top 5. I could get him onto some ballots. He's not going to win.
We did the Pacers preview with a part of our Central Division preview, which you can catch on the podcast. Spoiler alert, I'm already turning around. Pascal Siakam had all the young guys out for a workout and was talking to them about not being complacent, about how we haven't done shit. And I got so hyped by Pascal Siakam talking to these youngsters and being like, we haven't done anything. I won a title and then thought I would just be right back there. Haven't sniffed it. It was so awesome. It's the exact type of leadership that I want. Vibes are through the roof. I am buying back in on the Pacers. I'm not taking the over yet. But God, I will tell you, like, I am starting to be like, I don't know, man. Maybe they're going to be different. Talk to me about Ja.
Yeah, Ja's the guy I really wanted to come on and give out here. Like, until I did the whole research, he's the one I started at because I was like, all right, Grizzlies, let's do it again. He wasn't one of my bets last year because he had the suspension. He's age 25. That's a bullseye. He finished top 12 MVP both of his healthy seasons. So it wasn't last year, but we've got the voting history. He's only played 65 games once. That's not great. We know that's a problem. And that was 67. The BPM, it's like really great, but not quite elite. Like 7 or 8 is usually not quite there. Like, I think that's these guys is like, oh, you are ballot worthy, but you're not quite the MVP. Like, I fear he might be that. And I wanted to get there. I thought he would be like Halliburton. I thought he'd be like a 75 or 100-1. And I would have put like a quarter unit or half unit on him. And I would have bet him as my like sleeper. Let me plant a flag. I think he's mispriced. He's 40-1 now. He was 50-1 a month ago. That's about what I think he should be. I have him at 2%. So 50-1. There's not value. I don't, most of these prices are bad. I don't think he's a bad price. I can be fine with it. I just think there's an overwhelming chance he's going to lose. Here's where I come to. Isn't Ja Morant just Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, but with worse scoring on a worse team with worse health? It's a worse version of Shai and not a worse enough price for me to make up for it. So I can't begrudge you. It makes sense. I think he can get in the conversation. We'll talk about him. I think he is a ballot guy, not a winner guy.
I don't know. I actually think the question of who has more help is a really interesting one. But I will say, I agree with you on the Shai comp of not as efficient, right? Not as, and the other thing though, I actually think this is that he's not as much of an isocentric engine as Shai is. It's not just like, let's run 10,000 pick and rolls with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Like, Ja's a really great passer, but also like Bane and Jaren, while Ja's been out, have developed their offensive games because they had to. And they added Zach Edey. So like there's mouths that feed. And again, we talk about the parlay thing here. Ja has to put up the scoring. The Grizzlies have to be this good and this healthy. And let me put it this way. If the Grizzlies win 55 games, win the division, and secure the 1 seed, and the Dallas Mavericks win 54 games and are the number 2 seed, Luka Doncic is winning MVP.
Yes.
Like, Luka's going to blow away Ja in all aspects. So you're also betting on a Mavericks under. Not to some degree, at least an alt line of like Mavericks under 53.5.
I think it's the Shai thing from last year. I know you feel a little differently about how Shai compared to Jokic and others. I think Shai had to lap the field, and the Thunder had to lap the field last year for him to win it. And I think that's probably where Ja is at, where his case is not just we snuck through and got the 1 seed. it's got to be no doubt. This is the MVP. There's no other choices. You're up 7 games on the rest of the field. Like, that's the season you're betting on. The outlier of outliers for Ja. That's why Shai didn't win last year, is they didn't quite get there as a team. The one other guy, we have the same 3 guys here, so I guess that's probably good. Like, we have the same 3 guys for in the conversation. I'm going to let you do the case here, even though I like him also. 100-1. You're Bam Adebayo of the MVP conversation. Donovan Mitchell, take it away.
He's so good. I don't know why there's this idea that Donovan Mitchell isn't great. He was such a badass in the playoffs, too, so he's got that going for him. ISO-centric play, I think they figured out a little bit last year. The ball needs to be in Donovan's hands as much as possible. There's a possibility that they get into this season and they just realize, like, this, we got to, even though we're winning, hopefully, like, we got to break up Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell. And Garland gets moved, and then they just really go back to, hey, we're going to have Evan Mobley as like a stretch 4 and great rim protecting power forward, and we're going to run 1-5 pick and roll with Jared Allen because Mobley's 3-point rate picked up. And in the lineups where they just had Allen and Mobley or Allen and Mitchell with shooters, those things cooked. Donovan's phenomenal. He's so good at the rim. He's so good for mid-range. He's so good from 3. He's got so many moves to his game. He's a great passer, underrated in that aspect. He is capable of leading a top 5 offense, even though the Cavs have underwhelmed in that department. Maybe Kenny Atkinson unlocks that, and they're able to make that kind of jump if they get a little bit better health from their shooters, particularly Dean Wade. Again, I don't know why I find myself talking about Dean Wade on every single podcast. I just can't get past the idea of Donovan, because the whole thing the last 2 seasons has been like Donovan Mitchell's not even in this conversation. That there's like a subclass here, and I'm like, no, it is the big. I agree, it's the big 5, but some of those guys will not make it for injury or narrative reasons. And then that next category is Jalen Brunson, Jason Tatum, and in my opinion, Donovan Mitchell goes there too. And so that's exactly where he needs. So he just needs to get up there, but then I run into the same problem that we've talked about, which is I'm buying in on a CLV play where it's like Donovan Mitchell could finish 3rd in MVP. That doesn't do me any good. Does me no good unless I get a great cash out option at one book, and I don't want to do that.
Yeah, or it gave you such a strong position. Maybe he led in like January. If he could get there, that you like had such a strong spot to buy back on the other couple guys and hammer a position down, maybe. But we've talked about that. That's really hard to come up with too, if you have a likely losing ticket at the end of the day. To me, until we are allowed to bet on you will finish top 5 MVP or you will make X number of ballots, these are the guys. Halliburton, Ja, Donovan Mitchell, they're the exact guys that, like, we're all going to talk. One of those guys, I promise you, one of those 3 is going to be like top 5 in the conversation. They're going to be this year's Jalen Brunson. But last year's Jalen Brunson made you $0 betting him for MVP and wasn't even close. Like, didn't even set up you like a CLV position to try to hedge with other guys. Like, it just was an irrelevant ticket at the end of the day. And I personally think that Jason Tatum is pretty close to the same thing. So let's talk about the winner's dilemma of, if you just win a ton of games, do you win? Because that was my position last year, Matt. I was like, you know what? The Celtics might be really good this year. I'm very high on the Celtics. How do I bet the high-end outcome for the Celtics? Oh, I know. Best player, best team, Jason Tatum. At least I got that ticket. At least if I'm right, that the Celtics are really, 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 really good, like I think they might be, I got my MVP ticket. We've seen that before. Nope. Never in the conversation. 3 straight top 6s. That's Jason Tatum. He is a 3 straight top 6s guy and a really, really good team. I think at the end of the day, this is so esoteric. We just know Jason Tatum's not an MVP. We just know who is good enough to be MVP, and we know who isn't, and Jason Tatum is not. I'm sorry.
Okay, I don't disagree with your point. I don't disagree with your take. I think you're probably right on that. My issue is that that's not why he didn't win last year. He didn't win last year because Jason honestly had a season where he went down in a couple of key categories. He was a 30 points per game scorer in 2023, went back to 28. Like, he took, and this is a big deal, Jason Tatum, and this was honestly a big reason why I bet Jaylen Brown to win Finals MVP. Jason Tatum did what a lot of guys won't do, and that's he took a step back because it was what was best for how the team played. If the Celtics last year had played isocentric, Jason Tatum's going to have the ball all the time. And like he led them in usage. I'm not saying he didn't, because he's their best player. But if he had played more James Harden basketball, the Celtics would have been worse. And he knew that, and they knew that. And so they made use of how good their 5 guys were. And in a certain way, this is similar. And we can make this comparison because the Celtics, both statistical profile and just they won this many games and the championship, they are not as good as the Warriors with Steph and KD, but they were a great team like that team was. They had a great season at least. From that perspective, this was the same thing where it's like, look, Steph's numbers weren't like they were in 2016-15, and KD's numbers weren't like they were in 2014, because both of them sacrificed to one another and the other guys to make that 5-man unit, whenever they had 5 guys on the floor, better. Now, Jason's still young enough that he could make that jump, but I'll also say there's zero reason. I will just say that's why he didn't win last year, was that Jason Tatum did the stuff that you need to do in order to win a championship, and I thought he had a bad shooting year from mid-range. He just had a bad shooting year from mid-range. Those things could improve, but he's still not going to play that role on this team because they're bringing back the entire same core. They're not going to lean more into Jason Tatum. That's not going to happen. Tatum might get frustrated because he's probably pretty sick of everyone shitting on him for being the best player on a championship team and then not playing in the Olympics. But it's not like Jason Tatum sucks. And you're saying it's not that he sucks, he's just not good enough. And I get that. And I don't disagree. I think that it's possible that Jason Tatum at his age can still get there. I'm not ruling out the Jason Tatum. My point here is I don't think that you can rule out Jason Tatum winning an MVP in the next 5 years. But that's also not a reason to bet him next year.
I understand what you're saying, but I disagree. Like I don't have a strong case for it. I just think like you look at BPM, EPM, the advanced metrics that we know provably measure who wins MVP.
No, whoa. But those are based off of box score performance.
You're right.
Relative to their impact on the game. So like if Tatum's box score stuff isn't as good, then clearly his impact metrics based on box scores aren't going to be as good.
Right. And again, there's no way of proving this just based on all the data that we have seen so far. I disagree that there is a path for him to get to that level. The Jokic level, the Shai level, the Embiid level. I would, whatever line we're offered, if we could bet career MVPs under 0.5 for Tatum, I would want that line. I would bet it.
Another dinner.
Satisfied.
Another dinner. I'll take, I want 2-1 on Jason Tatum wins MVP in the next 5 years.
Done.
Okay.
All right, here's who I think is actually the winner's dilemma question here. It's not Jason Tatum. Jason Tatum could be in the mix. Jason Tatum will be in the mix. He's been top 6 3 straight years. Like, he's going to be in it. Jalen Brunson is the worst MVP bet on the board. I'm sorry. 18-1, the 7th favorite. 0% chance of MVP this year. It's not happening. He's not good enough. The Knicks are not good enough. His advanced metrics are never going to be good enough. He's not heliocentric enough as much as he does for them. It's not happening. Jalen Brunson is not winning MVP. 7th favorite is absurd.
I mean, I think my thing would be, again, it's a parlay thing. The odds are terrible. I would agree, but that's based off of like you need 3 of the 5 of the big 5. God forbid this. God forbid. I'm knocking on wood. You need 3 of the 5 to get hurt, and the other 2 to underperform. Like that's
but then
what
you still need like 5 more dudes to also not be good enough because Brunson
because again you're doing the thing of how you think about players versus the voters. Jalen Brunson finished 5th in MVP voting last year, buddy. If he has a better season for a more successful Knicks team, and we get that kind of outcome, yeah.
I mean, I said what I said. I think if you want to bet on a winning player...
Wait, hang on. This is interesting, though. Do you think that Jalen Brunson just had the best season of his career?
Yes.
Like,
I think Jalen Brunson just had his peak season and his peak MVP finish, and it gets worse from here.
And he'll never be better than this?
Correct.
Wow.
Never be more valuable individually to a team from the way we measure MVPs than this. Here's the guy I think is this category. I'm not betting Jason Tatum. I'm not betting Jalen Brunson. If you want to bet on the winner narrative, I can't believe I'm saying this, Matt. Devin Booker, 120-1, I think is the winner narrative pick. Here's the story. The Suns get the 1 seed. They win 55 games. Kevin Durant missed 20, 25 games along the way. That's what he does. Devin Booker, though, our man showed up every single night. He played through. Hey, who's got a lot of great narrative right now? Devin Booker, Olympics. This was the thing we were talking about. Man, a lot of guys didn't get to play. Jason Tatum didn't get to play. You know who played really well? You know who did exactly what they needed? Devin Booker. Made a lot of winning plays because he did. Like, I'm not dumping on that take. Like, that is correct. And I was going to say, well, no, it's still not going to be him. He can't get there in the advanced metrics. 13th in EPM. We said top 9. 13th is not so far from 9. Maybe it's just top 13. I don't know if he plays enough. I've never been here on Devin Booker. I don't think he does it night to night. I think he still has another level he could get to at 120-1. This is not my bet, but I think most of these bets are bad bets. And I would take Booker 120-1 over whatever the Brunson and Tatum odds are any day of the week.
I mean, look, I think we're probably sleeping on Devin a little bit in terms of he was considered to be like, I don't have him in top 10 for Elite 100 that I'm working on right now. And I was kind of like, I don't know, man. Like, he was there. What has he really done to slide out of it? And it's just like he had some injury seasons. And his team imploded. That's not really his fault. KD with a 28.5% usage rate last season. Devin Booker with a 29. This to me is just the problem, is like there's just not enough opportunity. I just think it's going to be really hard for him. Like, it would take a KD injury, and if you're going that route again, we're doing like a parlay. Like, you're doing like the parlay of KD gets injured and then Devin Booker steps up and delivers. There's any number of guys you could bet on under that premise, which I don't know if it's a good bet. Now I will say this: you could look really awesome by mid-season with a Devin Booker bet, but I also think that this is one that you can wait and see what happens in season and then still be early. Like, Booker's one where we will still be able to get a good price if things start lining up in October, November. We will have still a really good price in the first week of December to bet that, I would say.
Yeah, I think that that's true, but I think that the most likely outcome here, like the 98th percentile outcome, is Devin Booker being Donovan Mitchell, John Morant, Tyrese Halliburton. Like the thing we just said about where you've made the ballot, Jalen Brunson. So like if that's the most likely outcome, I have to get 120-1. Because if I wait and I get 30 or 40-1 for the ticket that's probably still going to lose anyway, that's not a valuable ticket anymore. So I think to me, it's a now or never. And I think it's probably still a never. I just think, given the odds, it's one where I think the pricing is slightly off. We've talked narrative a little bit. What else do you have to say on the narrative story with the award here?
Just real quick, because like you're gonna hear this a lot from the guys on buckets over the next couple of weeks, and I'll fight with them then too. I'm not disputing that narrative plays a part in it. You can look to 2023, and that was almost entirely a narrative award. It's not that Joel wasn't deserving. It's that Jokic was more deserving, and the narrative is why Embiid won. I would just say this, that we make it into purely like MVP is just a narrative award, and that's not accurate anymore. The voting block, I talk a lot about this, is made up of beat writers, national TV personalities, a handful of international folks, and analysts. Right? So like Zach Lowe goes on NBA Today, but Zach Lowe is much more of an analyst than Kendrick Perkins is, right? Like the Take Smiths, right? And so, or even the broadcasters, right? Like Zach Lowe is doing film work on, he'll do film work on Dyson Daniels on a Thursday night. That's not going to happen with insert broadcaster here. And that's okay. They have different jobs and different responsibilities. Okay. But what winds up happening is the beat writers are going to be pretty analytically inclined, because when they start doing these voting, they'll have noticed who like really impressed them, who they were impressed with from they won. And this is where it gets funny. It's like, well, the narrative is like, well, he's a winner. And it's like, well, that's a number. It's the number of wins that you won. That's a stat. And so they're going to have tracked all that stuff. They're going to have seen them in person. They will talk to coaches, etc., and analytics people. But like these metrics that I put on Twitter, they're going to see. and that other people put on Twitter, they're going to see. And they're going to do their own research and evaluating those numbers. And they will find stats that they individually care about. Like some people still like win share. Some people some people do still like PER. It's part of their process. It doesn't mean it's like, oh, he's number one PER, I'm picking him. No, but like they'll evaluate it. So there's like all these comparison levels. The idea that this is just like a who's the best story. There are voters who do that. Like Ramona Shelburne has not been duplicitous about this. Ramona's entire job is storytelling. That's how she does her job in covering sports. And so for Ramona, who is the biggest story in the league this season really matters to her. That's a completely fine and fair way to evaluate MVP. I have no problem with that because at least your process is consistent. But for you to assume that, like, well, the narrative, don't get carried away with the narrative is great for this guy, because you know who the narrative has not been great for? Nikola Jokic, and he's won the goddamn thing 3 times. So don't get caught up in the idea that it's entirely narrative. Finally, there is, however, momentum, and there is like a feeling that does encapsulate these players. And there is no player, I think, that has more push behind him, both from the players and the league and the media partners, and by extension, the media, than Anthony Edwards. Anthony Edwards is on opening night playing the Lakers. Like, that's like a fact that just like, oh, the Wolves are playing the Lakers. Yeah, I mean, they made the Western Conference Finals and the Lakers are the Lakers. That makes sense. No. They're putting Anthony Edwards as the face of the league. This is Ant versus LeBron. That's that matchup on opening night for this season in the game after Celtics Knicks. This is a big deal.
The Minnesota Timberwolves on opening night. You don't have to tell me anything more than that. They put the Timberwolves on opening night. What are we doing? It's Ant.
Right. So I would just say that if Ant's able to get, now there's a lot of stuff. John Schumann had a great article at NBA.com breaking down some of the weaknesses in Ant's game that he needs to improve on. If Ant gets better and he makes a leap, I will just tell you that a guy that finished 7th last year in MVP voting, only got 18 points, wasn't a lot. But there were times throughout the season with the Wolves as the number 1 seed where Ant was way higher. And it was, maybe this is the guy. There is a pathway here, Brandon, where he slips in between all these things that we're saying, where it's like they won a lot of games. And he's got the narrative. And the metrics improved. And he scored 25 per game. Where it's like Ant winds up being at least within the range of, man, he could really win this at some point late in the year.
I totally agree with you. I just think that the upside is a 3rd to 5th place finish. I think he is Luka from a couple of years ago. That I think he's the face of the league. He's the opening night. He's Christmas Day. He's all the things. I think he's still like, he is what's going to make me, it would not surprise me at all if he is the guy I'm sweating out losing my bet to at the end of the season. I'm just still okay losing my bet at the end of the season to him at these odds. Like, I think he could be in the mix. I just can't bet everybody, and I don't think I need to bet him yet. I think he needs to earn his place into the upper echelon, still one more spot, and then a different year win MVP after that.
Some of the timing problem, and just real quickly about how to bet this award in season. And there's not like a tried and true way to do this. What I will tell you is MVP narratives form much earlier than honestly people want them to. Like, nobody wants these awards to form until All-Star. But the problem with that is All-Star comes at like the 54 game mark. Like, it's way over that.
We got to talk about crap in October, November, and this is really fun to talk about.
No, it's not even really that. It's like, for me, it's like more like, look, if you've played 25% of the season, why does like that matters? And so we start having those conversations because, you can project that how they've played will at least give a better chance of how they're going to play the rest of the year, especially when we have these proven commodities. And so, like, first week of December, I think is a great time for you to start evaluating MVP. I think you can start looking at it then. Now, the counter to that is, I will just say, like, I genuinely, like, obviously, I've been critical of Joel in all sorts of ways. I felt bad about how things went last year. I hope he's able to get through the season healthy. I will just say this, that Joel makes the entire process really difficult because I got great prices on him in December. When they started out really slow, and it was like, man, the Sixers are like really struggling to start the season. And I was like, they're going to be fine. And Joel's killing it. And we got great prices on Joel. We got him great prices in October, November, and December. And I was like, okay, I'm set here. and then he got hurt, and the whole thing blows up. And it's really frustrating. And like that can happen with anybody. If you had Jordan Love ticket, right? If you had Jordan Love MVP ticket, that sucks for you. And that's part of betting on sports. I will just say that like with Embiid, I am at the point where you're going to have to show me that he's going to have to be within the home stretch for me to bet him. Like it's got to be like 50 wins or 50 games played. And I'm like, okay, he's going to get there before I can really consider it. It's just too much of a risk. So that's my kind of my thing on Embiid and about how you can get caught with like, I got great positions on Joel and then he got hurt.
Yeah, I think I would just say as a bettor, again, I can't bet everybody. I can't bet every player in the field. I can't build a position around 10 guys. I just have to be okay losing to Embiid. I just can be okay with that. And I think to me then what that implies is when Embiid has the Embiid stretch and is that good and is that deserving of if the season ended today, he could be the MVP. That was last year. I'm giving him credit for that. I've never done that before. I would give him credit for last year. I think what you have to do as a bettor is either you made the bet and you're riding Embiid out and you're just hoping he stays healthy, or if you're where I'm at and you decided, nope, I'm not doing it. I'm not playing that game. I'm not going to buy on that he gets those games and frankly beats the narrative of the playoff thing also, which I think is a problem for him specifically. When he has the moment, now you bet MVP, not for Embiid. Because now in December, when he is the favorite and all the odds are short for him and thus longer for everyone else, now you add your Jokic position if that's what you wanted to your ticket. Or now you bet, like, you don't have to just not bet Embiid when he's the favorite later, or Giannis or whoever that is. If you've decided that's the position you're not taking this year, you can consistently still do that, but use that momentum to buy you value elsewhere. And that's when you can build your position. I think that is a good way to bet MVP. We get the straw polls that come out now, and the winner at the end of the year is not the winner of the straw poll at the beginning. And the straw poll comes out, and the odds move further towards that guy because everyone's like, this guy's going to win. We better go bet him now. And like, that's the narrative swing. I think we can use the narrative swing to our advantage as bettors and maybe don't do that well enough.
I agree. It's funny you said that. I just pulled up the straw poll from December. Like I like literally while you were talking, I pulled up the straw poll from December. Guess who led the straw poll in December?
I'm gonna guess Embiid and Tatum.
It was Tatum.
Yeah, I thought it might be Tatum. I can remember when Embiid had the push.
Tatum, Giannis, Luka, Steph, Yoke. Oh, I'm sorry, this is wrong. This is from 2022. So that was the wrong one.
So that's 2 years.
Regardless,
so that was Tatum then. Tatum famously has not won MVP. So what's last year?
Has not won MVP. What I would tell you is just that first MVP. You should fade the first MVP straw poll. The third one is good for identifying who's going to be top 2. Sometimes it hits, sometimes it doesn't. It hit last year. It didn't hit the year before. You got a question here about how do we know who's actually winning for real? One of the things I think that is really interesting here is don't get caught up in the March hype. So I genuinely thought with as much hype as there was on the Mavericks over that back half of the season, I was convinced Luka was finishing second, and I was going to be mad about it. I don't know why I'm somebody that's going to get mad about a second place MVP finish, but this is my lot in life. I thought it was going to be Jokic and then Luka and then Shai. And not only did it wind up Jokic, Shai, Luka, but the gap was pretty considerable. Shai got 65% of the max share. Luka got 57% of the max share possible for him. So that's a pretty big gap there. There was actually a pretty substantial gap between Shai and Luka. And that's despite like Shai had his worst time in March in terms of a dip with production. He got hurt and then he was out, and he wasn't playing well because he was hurt, and then he was out, and then he came back and then played really well in like the last 3 weeks of the season. But that really kind of showed me, no, like the voters do pay attention. And so I do honestly think that if you want, like, the money making time is December and January, I think, for MVP. It sets you up as you're in this, you have done enough work, and then you have to maintain it the rest of the way. You can lose MVP late, but I think it's very hard for you to be completely out of it. Like I don't think anybody's going to come out of nowhere by New Year's and win it. It's like you will be in the conversation by New Year's, and then you got to be able to project the back half of the season. That's kind of my thoughts on how to bet it.
So I think the way to maybe fade the narrative and try to zoom out from the who's hot right now conversation, to me, my point on this question is advanced metrics. We'll do EPM and BPM here. So I gave you before the numbers on last year's finish of where that gave us a group to start from for this year. But this year's finish is even more important. So EPM, the last 11 years, which is the only years we have data for EPM, that's as far back as it goes, 6 out of 11 years, the EPM leader is the MVP. Number 1 is the MVP over half of the time, and every single MVP over the 11 years has finished top 5 in EPM. Now look, just because you're top 5 EPM on November 30th doesn't mean you are at the end of the season, but you're probably not going to jump from like 20th in EPM to top 5 or to number 1 later. So I think that's a marker. And then my stat, BPM. Do you need EPM? Do you need to jump? What do you got in EPM?
Do you know who led in EPM minimum 65 games played?
I do. It was Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
It was Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
Which is why you should also consider the stat I prefer. Well, the stat that I use more, box plus minus BPM. Do you know who led the league in BPM last year?
Jokic by a mile.
Jokic by a mile, as he did the year before, and the year before, and the year before that. Here is the BPM finish for MVP, starting last year and just going back 13 years in a row. I'm going to go real fast because you're going to notice real quick how this goes. Here's how the MVP finished in BPM. First, second, first. That's just Jokic all those years, and then Embiid the 1 year. First, second, first. First, second, first. That's it. Top 2 in BPM and first all but 2 of the times. That's it. So again, these metrics are helpful because they are capturing the thing that we are capturing with all the other work we're doing on MVP. We're capturing a lot of the same stuff, and I think they can help us get a little bit out of the narrative tangled web where it's mid-November, it's mid-January, and we're in the conversation. Pay attention to the metrics, because if the guy everyone's talking about still isn't in these metrics near the top, they're not going to win. History is very clear on that. EPM is down to the 5 guys again. BPM is down to 2. There's only 2 people, usually 1. So I think actually, you talk about December, check in December, and that's a good time to bet it. Your guy better be in these stats. They better be in the mix near the top of the list. And the fact that those are so clear, that's why when I say Tatum's not good enough, that's not a subjective decision about is he a hooper or not. Tatum's not going to finish first or second in BPM. That's my analysis, is that that's not going to happen for him. And history says you got to do that to win the award. And I think the in the conversation guys, Ja, Halliburton, Donovan, Tatum, Brunson, none of those dudes are finishing at this level of advanced metric. No. You just have to be a super duper duper star elite. That's what the metrics tell us. That's how it's gone year after year.
Okay, so we're here, and we've talked all about this. We've talked about all the bets that we wish we could make, that we won't. We talked about the 5 guys. Tell me, of the 5 guys, what are the best bets for MVP?
So for me, I'm betting 1 dude. And this is not my normal thing in MVP. Normally on this podcast and in my article, I have built a position. I think there are build a position years. I think this is a bet 1 dude year. Sometimes you plant your flag. I'm betting Shai Gilgeous-Alexander plus 600. It's a multi-unit bet for me. I think it might actually be my favorite awards bet of the NBA season. I haven't gotten to the other awards yet, but it's one that I really like. So here's the case.
Hang on. You winning this bet when I tried all year to drag you onto Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and still lost is going to piss me off to no end. Go ahead.
So that's a good point, and it's part of my case, actually. So here's the case. The stats are going to be there. He's going to score enough. He's going to have good numbers. The advanced metrics are going to be there. He plays defense. He's a two-way player. And frankly, I think his defense metrics might get even better this year because he's going to benefit from the team thing by them adding Caruso and Hartenstein and having all these really good defenders. He's going to get a boost in his numbers that some of these other candidates are not going to get from defense in the advanced metrics we just talked about. Quite frankly, I will admit to this, Matt. With my eyes, when I watch these players Do I feel Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is the Jokic MVP level or even the Embiid Giannis level? I don't. I'm not quite there yet. I'm the guy that needs convincing still. Joe and Jim keep trying in our chat all summer to convince me. I think that the numbers say otherwise, so it's something that I'm just missing. He's going to push 30 points a game. I'm not worried about the health of the games. You had a pushback on that. Here's the games played for him. 76, great. 68, fine. 56-35, oh no, not really. They shut him down to tank those years. Like, those are not representative numbers. 70 and 82. He's been fine. He's stayed healthy for them. He's played. And Oklahoma City is the clear 1 seed favorite. That's what the betting market tells us. And here's where I got to this on Matt. And to your point of what you said, I'm not the OKC guy, and I'm not the Shai guy, and I downgraded both of them accordingly, and they're still my 1 seed. That's why he's my MVP pick, because even the skeptic in me on the team and the player, and they're correlated, still has them as the clear 1 seed in the West. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander checks every one of the boxes for me. I think in my process, he is one of the clearest winner candidates that I've seen in the years that I've done this. I have him 35% to win MVP. So that would put him like below plus 200. We're getting a plus 600. That's 3x. You've got 2 guys you're betting. He's one of them. I don't mind the second guy. I don't think I need him. I'm just going to get my 1 position. I'm planting my flag. I think this number is way off. It's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander plus 600.
Yeah, I'm gonna have Shai as a position. The durability thing, I think, is more under the radar because they did shut him down, but they did shut him down with legit injuries.
Yeah.
Like they shut him down. Like, oh, why isn't Shai playing tonight? He's got a hamstring. I'm doing the air quotes for those listening on podcast. Like, that happens, right? Like, Damian Lillard had this forever, although Damian actually had like a pretty serious rib thing for a while, or abdomen thing. So I have to be on Shai if I'm as high on the Thunder as I am, because if Shai just puts in the numbers that he did last year and they win 60 games, even if I'm right on the Mavericks going over, if the Mavericks win 55 games and Shai wins 60, I just think it's going to be tough to be like, for them to take Luka over Shai, given what he's able to accomplish there from a team winning standpoint. But my biggest position is going to be on Luka. If you listen to the Southwest Division preview, you know that I'm all in on the Mavericks. I believe in it. I just think that they're going to win a ton of games. I don't know if I believe in them as a playoff, a title contender. And it's like, they made the finals last year, Matt. Yes, they did. They technically made the finals. They were there for a little bit.
Wow.
But I do think they're going to win a ton of regular season games. Yoke had a quote last year about Luka, and he's always going to be very complimentary of all the other MVP guys, unlike some. And he said that Luka was, quote, a one-man army. And I really thought about that, and I wrote my entire breakdown of Luka's MVP case based off of that concept, because it really does work. There is nobody in the league, Shai included, and I'm going to include Jokic in this as well. No one does more for their team than Luka. Jokic does less and has more impact, but no one does more possession to possession. Okay. The rebounding figures, the volume shooting, the number of assists, it's absurd. I think this is a terrible way to try and win an NBA championship. I think it's honestly a terrible way to build a team. I think it's bad for all the other guys trying to make themselves into actually getting paid down the line, because you take all the blame when they lose. Because it's like, oh, look at Luka's numbers. Look at Luka's numbers, and they let him down. And I think that sucks. I will say, though, that they rebalanced a little bit last year. They had better balance. They played with better pace. They figured out last year, essentially, like, we can't play just Luka, absolutely glacial pace, isocentric. We can't go that far into Harden, even though I think that's what really Luka wants, is he wants to be James Harden. He wants to play that style. They realized as a team that they're not going to, and they were better for it. Luka got eliminated early in the Olympics, so he's in shape right now. I don't know what he's going to look like when we get a training camp. He's in shape right now. That's on the Instagram. That makes me feel more confident in his ability to stay in shape. He's been hanging out with Jokic more, and Jokic is going to tell him, like, I had to start getting serious about my conditioning. That was a big change for me. And guess when that change happened? Right about the time that he was Luka's age. Like, it's literally like the timeline is almost entirely similar. Okay, how about guys that lost in the finals? Did they win MVP? I got a list here. Let's go back to 1990, Magic Johnson. Let's go to all the way back to 1982, Moses Malone, after he lost in the finals with Houston, got traded to Philadelphia and then won. Larry Bird in 86. Julius Erving actually won in 81. Now, let's go to more modern era. You got Dirk in 07, Dallas Maverick, and you got LeBron in 2012. It's rare because it's rare to win MVP and it's rare to make the finals. Both those things are very, very rare. But it's not like unheard of. If this had been like no one has ever lost in the finals and then won MVP the season afterwards, I would be like, all right, that's a pretty good trend. Maybe I'm not going to bet it. But it's happened. Like, guys have gotten there. And guys have obviously been in MVP conversation the year after. We can go through all these guys that along the way. And so no reason for me to doubt that. I just think that Luka's absolute sheer absurdity of numbers combined with the best roster that he's ever had, all those things combined, I do think if the numbers are close, even if the Thunder win 57 games, which is a great season, they won 57 last year. If they win 57 games and the Mavericks win 54, and Luka's numbers still absolutely dwarf Shai's just from points, rebounds, assists, I think it's going to be very hard for voters not to vote Luka. They love him. This is something I've been on for a while. Everyone loves Luka. There's no resistance to him with the media. He is welcomed. He's part of the club like the other superstars love him. There's no resistance to him. I think this is the year that Luka gets it done. I think you have to bet Luka even at a short price at plus 375.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's my second favorite here. So I'm going to disagree with a couple of things, and that's why I'm not betting him. But you're not my second favorite unless I think you have a real chance to win MVP. I have him at 18% to win MVP. So that makes him slightly not a good bet here because he should be something like plus 450 versus plus 375. You're right about the narrative. Like, there's a huge narrative swing for him coming off a finals berth where it's like, oh, you've done in the playoffs now. I personally thought he's always done in the playoffs, but now he's done in the playoffs with teammates that won and made the finals. Huge narrative swing. Stats are great. The advanced metrics are great. I think you're overstating the difference between him and Shai on what the numbers are going to look like because of Shai's scoring. Like, they're going to be similar. I don't think he's going to dwarf him. Here are my two concerns with Luka. Number one, it's the team thing. It's the team Mavericks comparison. And look, I'm a little down on both the teams, the Thunder and the Mavericks. It's just that the floor is much higher in OKC because it's where they're starting from last year. Here's Luka's win total by the season the last 5 years. And two of these are win rates because they were shortened seasons. Last year, 50, 38, 52, 48, 47. That's not enough to win MVP usually, unless it's a Russell Westbrook type MVP, which frankly is maybe the type of one Luka might need to win at some point. But if we're going to do the team argument, it's not quite good enough. Probably the best teammates that he's had, though, so maybe that's close enough. The other problem is sneakily, I am concerned about the health and the games played here. Here's the games played for Luka in the last 6 seasons. 70, 66, 65, 66, 61, 72. So he's gotten to the number, all but one of them, but he's also been like 2 games missed away from missing it 4 of the 6 seasons. And it's pretty much going to be right in play where probably if he's close, they'll just make sure that he plays those last couple games and make him eligible for the award. Like, the Mavericks are certainly an organization that I think would do that and prioritize that and want him to win the award. But it's enough to me where I think basically, I think these are the 2 guys that should be around these prices. I think their prices are backwards. I think Shai should be the guy at the shorter price and the favorite. I think Luka should be like plus 600. And then I would do what you're doing and I'd bet both of them. So here's my question for you. I've got 3 possibilities here, and I think I've already made my choice, but you may be able to talk me into a different version. So option 1, I just bet Shai 6-1. He's my guy. I have him 35% to win. That's the best value proposition to me. 35% versus implied 14% by the plus 600. That's option 1. Option 2, I personally, if it were available, would take Shai and Luka versus the field. By my numbers, I have Shai and Luka 53% to win. Your position is you could take Shai and Luka together. You're getting them at these prices. That is a plus 183. So by my numbers, you're getting 35% implied versus my 53%. And now you're better than a coin flip to actually win the bet. I'm not. I'm still more likely to lose my bet than win it, even though I like my bet. So that's position 2. You get both guys. Position 3 is you just take the 5 guys. You can bet all 5 together at what effectively turns into minus 400, but have what I think is pretty much like, what's my percentage? I think I have that at like 85 to 88% or something, where it's one of those 5 guys. And now you're very, very likely to win. You're almost 90% to win the bet. You're just not going to win very much because you invested a lot on the 5 favorites. It's like the DPOI argument that I do. So which one of those do you like best or think is the right bet? I think to a listener, I think you could choose any of the 3, but is it bet my one value proposition that's best, Shai, bet the 2 guys that give me a 50-50 shot at not 50-50 odds, Shai and Luka, or just bet all 5, be done, and feel like I've locked in a winner at a very small profit? Is there any of those you don't like that you would definitely not do if you are listening?
I think it's betting all 5 is the one I wouldn't do. We've given all these reasons for why those guys are unlikely to play enough games or be in the conference or win the award, right?
Right.
And so for me, like let's remove that one. So I think it's Shai versus Shai and Luka.
Okay.
I actually think that you should just bet Shai. And the reason is, I would say it's like a coin flip chance that Luka's number will be longer than Shai's after the first 2.5 months of the season, that you will not have a buy point. Like, I just think that there's very likely for you to have a buy point. Now, it may go the other way, right, where Luka
starts out hot, looks good, it becomes the favorite right away, and I just can't ever add him to my position anymore.
And you lost, and like you lost a bet, right? You lost a 6-1 bet, and that's fine. But there's got to be there will be entry points there, and truthfully, there will be entry points for Joel and Giannis and Jokic. Right. And for me, it's just like Embiid's entry point has to be way further into the season than Giannis and Jokic's. If I'm wrong on Bucks under, and Doc has them competent, and Brook Lopez looks spry, and they're able to like actually look like they're on the same page, you can believe, because like Giannis was unfreaking believable last year. Like he was so good.
It was awesome.
And so I think the injury stuff with him is real. But I am of the opinion of like, yeah, there's a very good chance that Giannis can win another MVP. And so I think you'll have buy points. I don't think that this is like, I mean, look, in reality, if you're just like, I only want to buy at the best spot, I want to get the best of the number no matter what, then I would have to tell you, like, do not bet Luka Doncic. Do not bet him at 375. You'll get a better price. Like, you will get a better price than Luka Doncic down the line. With Shai, I think that there's a good chance that 6-1 is the best price point.
I do too.
And so that's, to me, you should bet Shai now.
Because that's only available at one major book right now. A lot of books have them at 5-1 or shorter. So you've got to play at the right book anyways for that one. Right. I think, Matt, I think you and I are both making the correct bet for where we're at on these teams. I think I should bet only Shai and look to possibly add Luka later at like a 10-1 or something if he drops out early. I think that would be smart. That's the thing I've not done in recent years. And getting my bet to where I make it over half, or 50-50 versus the field, I think that would be wise. That's where I have lost some money here and some profit. I will keep an eye on that. I think you are making the right bet for you because you are higher on the Mavericks. And if you are, then getting Luka position right away with Shai, I think is right. And I think to listeners, the main takeaway I would be hearing is that our 2 MVP experts who have like lived and breathed MVP for decades of their lives are very confident in the 2 guys at the top of the race this season. And we'll see what happens from there. But we've been very good at identifying who is at the top of the race. Not necessarily who wins the race, but we're pretty clear on the top 2. And if I were listening, I think that'd be a pretty strong takeaway for me.
It's going to do it for Buckets. Hope you guys enjoyed it. This is the deepest of deep dives on MVP. Hope you guys have had a good one. All this week, we'll have more MVP content. I've got Brian Fonseca coming on to tell us who's not going to win MVP. We'll play MVP Price Finder this week as well with Sean Little. And we're going to have a little bit of a conversation with an MVP voter as well. Make sure to keep it here all week for more on MVP week. My thanks to David Payne, our producer, as well as Tito, getting this up at youtube.com/theactionnetwork. We'll see you guys again next time. Till then, let's get buckets.